You know, people love to pretend they're fine when they're not, especially avoidants. They've mastered the art of dodging emotions like it's a full-time job. They distract themselves, they build walls, they hide behind silence, and they convince themselves they don't care. But here's the truth. Everyone cares about something. Everyone feels deeply even if they've convinced themselves they don't. The key to getting an avoidant to confront their true feelings is not to chase, not to beg, and definitely not to argue your way into their heart. That never works. What you need is a shift in energy. You have to stop giving them the comfort of your constant availability. You have to create space, and that space, it becomes a mirror. When they no longer have you there filling the silence, they're forced to sit in it. And in that silence, their real emotions start to surface. Avoidants are experts at avoiding themselves as much as they avoid you. But when life stops distracting them, they have no choice but to face what's going on inside. That's why your job isn't to wake them up with your words, it's to wake them up with your absence, your boundaries, and your self-respect. When you stand in your own worth, you silently challenge them to examine why they're running in the first place. And here's the thing, avoidants aren't heartless. They're scared of being hurt, scared of losing themselves, scared of relying on someone. But when they see that you can care for yourself without clinging, they start to realize something: they can't avoid their feelings for you are real. And those feelings, they don't disappear just because they stay quiet. In fact, they grow louder when there's no distraction to drown them out. So stop trying to convince them of your worth, show it. Live it, give them the room to see the difference between life with you and life without you. Eventually, their avoidance will turn into curiosity, their curiosity into reflection, and that reflection will lead them right to their truth. When you create space with an avoidant, you're not punishing them, you're giving them the one thing they can't ignore themselves. Avoidants are experts at keeping busy, staying distracted, and finding ways to escape emotional intimacy. They'll fill their days with work, hobbies, social obligations, or even mindless scrolling just to avoid sitting with what they feel. But when you step back, when you stop reaching out first, when you no longer fill the silence with your voice or presence, something shifts. The noise in their life quiets down, and what's left is that uncomfortable stillness that reveals the truth they've been dodging. This space acts like a mirror. It reflects their own patterns back to them. At first, they may not like what they see. Maybe they see fear, hesitation, or the habit of running when things get close. But human nature is wired for connection, even in the most guarded hearts. When you stop making it easy for them to avoid emotional confrontation by always showing up, they're left to notice the gap you've left behind. That absence starts to feel heavier over time. They begin to notice the missing energy, the missing laughter, the missing warmth that you brought into their life without them realizing how much it mattered. Space works because it removes their ability to rely on you as an emotional safety net, while avoiding commitment. If you're always there, they can keep avoiding their feelings without facing any consequence. But when you step back, their comfort zone starts to collapse. They can't lean on your constant presence anymore, and that's when self-awareness starts creeping in. They begin questioning themselves. Why do I feel this way? Why do I keep thinking about them? Why do I miss them? That inner questioning is the first crack in their emotional armor. What's important here is that creating space is not about manipulation. It's about protecting your own energy and letting natural emotional consequences take their course. When someone no longer has the distraction of you always reaching out, their mind starts to wander back to moments, conversations, and feelings they've been trying to bury. And with each passing day, the reality that they might lose you for good forces them to confront the fact that they do care more than they've admitted to themselves. Think of it this way: when you're right in front of them all the time, they don't have to picture life without you. But when you step back, they're suddenly living that reality, and the longer they sit with it, the harder it becomes to deny what's in their heart. Your absence becomes a spotlight, shining directly on the feelings they've been running from. And when they finally turn to face themselves in that mirror, they'll see the truth they've been avoiding all along. Boundaries are one of the most powerful unspoken languages you can use with an avoidant. They communicate self-respect, self-worth, and emotional strength without you having to utter a single word. When you set and uphold boundaries, you shift the dynamic from you chasing them to you choosing yourself. and that change in energy is impossible for them to ignore. An avoidant may be used to people tolerating their distance, accepting their lack of emotional availability, and bending to their comfort zone. But when you show them through action that your emotional needs matter just as much as theirs, it creates a subtle but undeniable jolt in their awareness. Boundaries work because they remove the cushion that allows avoidance to thrive. Without boundaries, an avoidant can come and go as they please, give as little as they want, and still receive your full presence and emotional investment. That only reinforces their pattern of staying comfortable in emotional detachment. But when you start saying no to things that drain you, or yes, only when it's truly aligned with your needs, you change the game. You're no longer feeding the dynamic that keeps them in avoidance, you're making them face the reality that connection with you requires reciprocity. It's important to understand that boundaries are not about controlling them or demanding they act differently. They are about defining what you will and will not accept in your own life. When you hold firm to those lines, you stop trying to convince them of your worth and instead live in a way that naturally shows it. For an avoidant, this is a wake-up call. They begin to realize that their old strategies for keeping emotional distance no longer work with you. You're not going to stick around in a half-present connection, and you're not going to sacrifice your self-respect to keep them comfortable. The quiet strength of boundaries is that they shift the power back into your hands. Instead of reacting to their push and pull behavior, you're making decisions based on your own values and well-being. This forces the avoidant to either step up or step away, but either way, it breaks the cycle of you doing all the emotional labor. And here's the subtle truth. When they feel that shift, many avoidants will be drawn closer, not because you're chasing them, but because your boundaries create a sense of stability and selfish assurance they can't ignore. Over time, they'll start to feel the difference in how you interact. You're not emotionally overextending. You're not always available at their convenience. You're showing them that your life is full and fulfilling whether they step up or not. And that contrast makes them reflect on why they're holding back and what they stand to lose. Boundaries don't just protect your heart, they hold up a mirror to theirs, making them confront the truth about how much they value you and what they're willing to do to keep you. Absence has a way of pulling emotions to the surface that someone has tried to bury. For an avoidant, this can be a deeply unsettling experience because their entire coping mechanism is built around distraction and emotional distance. When you are consistently present in their life, they can keep those feelings at bay by relying on the comfort of your availability. But when you step back and your presence fades, the emotional shield they've been hiding behind starts to weaken. Without you there to fill the gaps in their days or offer that steady flow of connection, they are left alone with the very emotions they've been avoiding. At first, they may respond to your absence with a sense of relief, telling themselves they prefer the space. But as time passes, that relief is often replaced by a creeping awareness of what's missing. The little things you brought into their life, your humor, your warmth, your perspective, your support begin to stand out in their memory. They start noticing moments when they instinctively think about you, but can't reach for you the way they once did. That quiet ache is the early sign that the feelings they've been pushing down are resurfacing. Absence removes the noise. It takes away the distractions that make it easy to avoid emotional reflection. When the constant flow of interaction stops, they can no longer hide behind routine or busyness to escape their truth. This emptiness becomes a contrast before and after showing them the emotional impact you had on their life. The void you leave behind makes them realize that your connection wasn't just convenient background noise. It was a source of genuine meaning and comfort. The beauty of absence is that it doesn't require you to say a single word. You're not trying to convince them of anything, you're not pleading for attention, and you're not demanding they feel a certain way. Instead, your lack of presence forces them to confront the natural consequences of emotional avoidance. Without you, they experience first, and the gap created when someone who truly cares steps away. That lived experience is far more powerful than any conversation you could have with them. And as days turn into weeks, absence transforms from a physical space to an emotional reckoning. They begin to replay moments in their mind, not out of obligation, but because those moments matter to them more than they admitted. The laughter you shared, the encouragement you gave, the way you made them feel understood, all of it becomes sharper in their memory. Those feelings don't just fade in the quiet, they grow louder, and the more they try to push them away, the more persistent they become. In the end, your absence is not about making them miss you out of loneliness. It's about giving them the chance to feel the truth without interference, the truth that they cared more than they let on, and that no amount of avoidance can erase that. Avoidants don't just avoid you, they avoid themselves. Their pattern of emotional distance isn't only about keeping others at arm's length. It's also about not having to deal with their own fears, insecurities, and vulnerabilities. They build walls not just to keep people out, but to keep certain truths from surfacing inside themselves. When you create distance, you interrupt that cycle. Suddenly, they can't hide from the reality of who they are and what they feel, because the distraction of your constant presence is no longer there to cushion them. When someone is always there, an avoidant can focus their energy outward on the other person's needs, flaws, or behaviors rather than looking inward. But when you step back, you remove that external focus. They are left with only their own thoughts, their own memories, and their own unresolved emotions, and that's where the real discomfort begins. Your absence acts like a spotlight on the emotional blind spots they've worked so hard to ignore. This forced self-reflection can be unsettling for them, because it means confronting feelings they've denied. Maybe it's fear of abandonment, a belief they're unworthy of love, or a deep anxiety about losing themselves in a relationship. Whatever it is, without you there to buffer those fears, they have to face them directly. This isn't something they can do while you're constantly present, because avoidance thrives on external distraction. By stepping back, you give them the uncomfortable but necessary opportunity to meet themselves in the mirror. And here's the thing, many avoidants don't realize how much they've been running from their own hearts until they have no other choice but to slow down. They may have told themselves for years that they don't need deep connection, that they're fine on their own, or that emotional intimacy is just too much. But when the person who brought them warmth, safety, and understanding is no longer there, those beliefs start to crack. The absence forces them to feel the weight of their own defenses, and for the first time, they can see how those defenses might be costing them something they truly value. This internal reckoning doesn't always happen quickly. At first, they might double down on their independence or convince themselves that the distance is a good thing. But over time, as the noise in their life fades, the emotions they've buried rise higher. Memories of connection start to trigger questions: why did I push them away? Why am I thinking about them so much? What am I really afraid of? Those questions are the beginning of emotional confrontation. By refusing to play the role of constant emotional caretaker, you give them a chance to experience the discomfort that leads to growth. You're not forcing them to face their feelings. You're creating the conditions where they can't avoid them forever. And in that space, they may finally realize that the person they've been avoiding all along isn't just you, it's themselves. Showing your worth without trying to convince someone is one of the most powerful ways to shift an avoidance perspective. When you try to persuade them with words, they can rationalize, deflect, or shut down. But when you live in a way that naturally reflects your value through your actions, your boundaries, your joy, and your independence, you bypass their defenses. You're no longer chasing validation from them. You're creating an undeniable presence that speaks for itself. And that presence is far harder to ignore than any argument you could make. Avoidants often struggle with trust, not just in other people, but in their own feelings. If you try too hard to prove your worth to them, it can trigger their fear of being pulled into something they're not ready to confront. They may retreat even further, not because you're unworthy, but because the pressure disrupts their sense of control. That's why showing rather than convincing is so powerful. It removes pressure. It allows them to notice your value organically, in their own time, without feeling like they're being cornered. When you focus on living your best life, investing in your passions, nurturing other relationships, and maintaining your emotional health, you create a contrast they can't ignore. They begin to see the version of you that is confident, fulfilled, and not defined by their attention. This contrast can be eye-opening for an avoidant because it challenges their assumptions. They may have believed that you needed them more than you needed yourself. But when your actions prove otherwise, it shifts the dynamic entirely. This approach also highlights something avoidants rarely admit. They are drawn to strength. Emotional independence and self-respect are deeply attractive qualities, especially to someone who fears being consumed by another person's needs. By showing that you can love them without losing yourself, you create a sense of safety. They start to realize that being close to you doesn't mean sacrificing their freedom, and that realization lowers their emotional guard. The beauty of showing your worth is that it's sustainable. You're not putting on an act to get their attention. You're building a life that fulfills you, with or without them. Over time, this makes your presence in their life feel less like a demand and more like a gift. And when they see that your happiness isn't dependent on their approval, it forces them to reflect on why they're holding back. That reflection can be the spark that makes them confront their feelings honestly. Instead of standing in front of them asking for recognition, you're walking past them living your truth. And in doing so, you plant a seed in their mind, the awareness that you are someone of value, someone they may lose if they don't step forward. That awareness lingers, grows, and eventually becomes impossible to ignore. It's not about making them feel guilty. It's about inspiring them to see the reality they've been avoiding. You are worth choosing, and they already know it. In the end, getting an avoidant to confront their true feelings isn't about chasing them, convincing them, or breaking down their walls for them. It's about creating the space, setting the boundaries, living your worth, and letting your absence speak louder than any words could. When you step into your own power and stop trying to manage their emotions, you give them the opportunity to face themselves and realize what they truly feel. The truth is, you're not here to prove you're enough, you already are. Thank you for listening, for showing up for yourself, and for being brave enough to choose your own value first.